Am I the a-hole for telling my daughter the truth of how I felt about being pregnant? And do I have no photos of me pregnant with her? My 52 female daughter, 28 female, is expecting her first child with her husband in June. I am very excited to be a grandmother. My daughter is very, very excited and cannot wait to be a mother. She already has the nursery all picked out, started buying clothes, getting toiletries such as nappies and wipes organized. It works. We have a very close relationship, and she texts me about her first kicks, baby's heartbeat. She has this thing called a doppler, potential names, etc. I'm thrilled she is so excited and happy because, in all honesty, it was the very opposite of how I felt. The truth is, I hated being pregnant with both my children. Pregnancy honestly scared me. I was anxious all the time. Every movement and lack of made me scared. I hated the feeling of being so heavy and limited in movement, on top of all the normal pregnancy symptoms of fatigue, nausea, swollen ankles, hemorrhoids, sore back and feet, etc. And then don't get me started on the childbirth, which was next level. Don't get me wrong, I was very excited to become a mom and I love both my children. They are my absolute world. I just didn't like the process to get there. One thing she bought was one of those baby memory books. It has already started by putting some photos of her bump and ultrasound photos in them. For fun, she dug out the baby books I had for both her and younger brother, and we looked through them for a trip down memory lane. For both books, I started at the newborn stage. The pages for 20-week bump and first ultrasound, etc. are blank for both. My daughter asked why this was the case. She always thought maybe it was the lack of technology of the time. For you youngins out there, yes, we did have cameras and ultrasounds in the 90s. This is when I told her the truth, that I hated being pregnant. It made me scared and anxious, and I didn't want any memories of it. Pregnancy and childbirth terrified me, even for her younger brother when I had a bit more of an idea. I also explained why I was so happy to see her so happy, because I didn't want her to feel like I did. She got very quiet and didn't seem very engaged the rest of the time looking at the books. When she left to go home, she seemed a bit distant. Later that night, my son-in-law called me to say my daughter was very upset about what I said. Apparently, I made her feel unwanted, like she was a burden to bear. I was shocked and upset to hear that myself, because that was the opposite of how I felt, and told my son-in-law that. I explained I love my daughter and her brother very much, and I wouldn't trade them for the world. I just didn't like being pregnant, but that doesn't mean my child was not wanted. My son-in-law understood, but still said my daughter is upset. Am I the a-hole for confessing my feelings? I feel very guilty, and the last thing I wanted to do was stress my pregnant daughter out, a time when stress and feeling upset needs to be kept to a minimum. Am I the a-hole for being mad at my parents that they got my older brother a car for his 18th birthday and not on mine, and then causing the whole family to be up in arms about it till they came through? Okay, I know the title sounds like I'm spoiled, but hear me out. My brother 20 got a car for his 18th birthday. Not a new car or anything. It was a 20-year-old Lexus that was in pretty good shape. And he rubbed it in my face for the rest of the time he was in senior year of high school. Compared with my brother, I get just as good of grades as he does. Better in some cases even. I worked my hardest in the hope of fairness. And I even did some volunteering cleaning up garbage in my local area. Then my 18th birthday came and went a few weeks ago. And the only thing I wanted, the only thing I was hoping for, was a car. I wasn't expecting something like a new car or a sporty car, just something reliable like my brother got. The party wasn't even anything like my brother's 18th. For his 18th, my mom baked the cake herself. It was a delicious layered chocolate pudding cake, while I got a sheet cake from the supermarket. For his, they got a DJ. For mine, it was my dad's old boombox with a couple of mixed CDs. We went through the whole party, and I figured my parents might have just been waiting to spring a surprise gift on me, but that didn't happen. I asked them as things were wrapping up why there was no car when my brother got one. and they said that they felt like he'd worked harder for it. I asked what he did that I didn't do, because I did all of that and more. My grandma was nearby and heard everything, and then she asked them why as well. She ended up lecturing my parents that she was very, very, very disappointed in them for showing favoritism. Then she proceeded to announce to everyone still there that my parents thought it's fine to get their firstborn son a car and a DJ, but not their second. And then she even pointed out how much harder my parents tried for my brother's 18th birthday than they had for mine. My uncle was the first to stand up and say something, then everyone else who'd not left yet. I ended up just walking away and going to my room to sit and think. I got a few I'm sorry calls from relatives, and my grandparents convinced me to go out with them for the evening. But when I got back, my parents were pissed and told me I'd shamed them to the whole family. I just walked past them because I didn't want to fight. The next few weeks went by with a silent treatment between us. But then a few days ago, my parents suddenly surprised me with a white 98 Subaru Legacy that runs great. They practically threw the keys and the title in an envelope at me and said to have fun. I got the car and they're paying for insurance for the next 6 months like they did for my brother. I know a car isn't a real right, but a privilege, so I feel like I've essentially blackmailed my parents into getting me one. Am I the a-hole for how all this played out? Edit. I would like to clarify a few things. My parents make pretty good money and also don't go out of their way to live lavishly by choice. They've always been moderate in everything they buy or do. Though if anything is stretching their finances, it's my brother's college tuition. He got a partial scholarship and my parents are paying the rest. I don't and never intended to ask for the same treatment than that. I want to work and pay my own student loans. Now that I have the car, I'm already looking into getting a part-time job. This also isn't a gender thing as I'm male like my brother. The bill of sale for the car I got says my parents paid $1,600 for it, while my brother's car cost them about $3,000+ if I remember. But I don't see it as a money issue. I actually really loved a Subaru and told my parents so, though they did not share my enthusiasm. I also did try to talk about a car with my parents a few times last year, but they always dodged the conversations about the topic. I figured if I talked about it too much, it'd ruin it, and so I stopped. I would have felt like a brat to keep talking about getting an imaginary car, so I learned to just stay silent and hope. I can't go stay with my grandparents because they live in a one-bedroom condo. There isn't enough room for other people. After all their kids grew up, my grandparents decided to downsize to make their eventual retirement easier. Also, my grandparents know all of the details already, and they tell me that I didn't do anything wrong, and we're already planning on confronting my parents quietly over the car issue. But they took the chance to take care of the matter when they heard me asking my parents about it. As for my brother's 18th birthday party, it was held in 2020 during basically the height of the pandemic. Honestly, we shouldn't have had a big party like that at a time, but my parents insisted. As for my brother himself, he barely speaks to me, even before he left for college. He didn't show up at my 18th birthday party, and I figured that's just because he's busy with college and he's not even in the same state as us anymore. Honestly, I haven't seen or heard from him since Christmas, and even then, the most I got out of him was a mild greeting. I didn't thank my parents for the car. Enthusiastically thanked them even, but they've barely said a word to me after giving me the Subaru. And when I thanked my parents, they brushed me off and just went inside. It kind of gave off the vibe that they were letting a brat play with this new toy, which was pretty upsetting and one of the reasons I made this post. Added to, there was one more thing I forgot to say. I was really hoping to get the car because I literally couldn't get a part-time job without one. We don't live in the city and we're 10 miles from the nearest public bus stop. I've always had to get rides to go anywhere. Now that I have the car, I intended to look for a part-time after-school job as soon as I can. Am I the a-hole for going home when my wife didn't let me into the delivery room? My male 28, wife female 29 gave birth a few days ago. We had what I believe to be a fairly standard pregnancy, and I did my best to take care of things and make it easy for her. I took her to the hospital when she was due and her sister and mother met us there. The problem started when she was taken to the delivery room. She asked the nurse that only her mother and sister, female 27, be allowed in the delivery room, and then told me that she wanted me to wait until I've delivered and calmed down before letting me into the room. I was kind of shocked and didn't want to make a scene, so I just said okay and sat down in the waiting room. We had not really discussed the plan for the hospital, and I had no reason to think I wouldn't be there when my son was born. I texted her sister if she knew my wife was going to do this. She said no. I told her to ask if my wife was concerned about something, because I don't consider myself someone who would have made a fuss or made things more difficult for her. She texted back after a while saying that my wife just doesn't want you to see her like this, and then added that she didn't agree with my wife and tried to convince her. But ultimately it was her choice and I should just respect it. I sat in the waiting room for 6 hours getting minimal updates as the labor was fairly slow. And then I decided that there was no point. So I texted her sister that I was going home. I'd meet my son when they brought him home and handle the birth certificate stuff the next day. They came home about 9 hours later and I was finally able to meet my son. When my wife's mother and sister left, she got very angry at me for leaving her at a hospital. I was angry too, but I told her that we can't talk about this in a few days because she's just given birth. She wouldn't drop the subject, so I finally told her that she excluded me from the birth of my son for no reason. I didn't see the need to hang around a hospital waiting room for hours doing nothing, and that even her own sister thinks what she did was wrong. She said there could have been complications and I needed to be there. To which I replied that no, I wouldn't have been there because she kept me out of the room, and the doctors would have handled any problems anyways. She called me an inconsiderate a-hole and has been talking short with me for several days. Her sister told me I should just apologize and move past it because it was